I am live. Here we go, guys. All right. So this is part of the several part series that I'm going through where I'm going to teach stuff and go over stuff that I've never gone over before in relation to how I run our property tax division of our company here, and and all the different components that make up there are things that I've learned over the years. And so today is going to be totally different. I'm going to go over stuff that I've never gone over before, and I want you to think of it not like it's a presentation, not like it's like you're not. If you're here to be entertained, then it's not going to work out for you because this is something that I'm probably going to go over this one time ever. And I may be wrong about that, but right now I'm not planning on ever going over this stuff again. So if you're interested in what I'm going to go over, it's probably going to be a little bit more dense. I'm probably not going to cover a lot of the simple stuff that I've covered before. However, I'll touch on it all. But I'm going to go deep on this. And so instead of thinking, gosh, this is boring, I'm having to sit here, wait for a website to load or anything along the lines of just the entertainment value is just not going to be high on this. I'm trying to set expectations low. I want to just sit here and talk with you about how I go through this. If you're a tax consultant or you are a realtor and you want to learn how to do this on your own, this is going to give you a good step in the right direction. So here we go. All right. The big question. And I'm also going to give the evolution of this. All right. So I started this in 2017, and I started because I was somebody. I'm going to skip the backstory. Somebody had questions for me about their property tax value notice, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to answer the questions and provide some free comps. That's what most realtors do if they're going to help with this. And so I was doing that, and then people wouldn't take the information and go apply it, and they wouldn't go protest, or if they did go protest, they wouldn't be successful. And so we started running comps, so then I just thought, what if I just start protesting for people just like the tax consultants do, and but now we just charge a fee or we don't charge a fee, and so what if we just do it for free? And I thought, how bad could it get if I just start doing this? And so we started down the path. And one thing led to another, ended up protesting for somewhere around 1,700 people that first year. But the first year, the way I started was I started by just asking people to send me their blue value notice. I would take that PIN number. I would go to the appraisal district's instant answer system. I would plug in the numbers. And then I got enough of those blue value notices, and I got to try enough times where I thought, what, we can figure out how they're calculating this thing. And so we just started plugging in a bunch of numbers and trying different calculations, and through trial and error, we were able to isolate the exact formula that they were using. And I know that because we tested it. We would just, I'd have a stack of 20 of these things, and I would protest and I would do a calculation, and then I would go $1, I would do the exact calculation and I would press submit, and then it would kick back the answer and we would get a reduction. And then I would do it again and go $1 below that calculation, and it wouldn't get accepted. So that's how we started. Then at a certain point, actually somebody at the appraisal district said, "Hey, Chandler, it's really great you're trying to help all these people, but let me help you out a little bit." This is a good guy behind the scenes that said, "Chandler, let me help you out a little bit. You're doing this, but you really should be getting some authorization forms signed from these people just so we can have them on file." And so and at this time, I think that the guy and me, we were all sitting there looking at it, and I would do them live with people. In the beginning, I would do them live on webinars with people, and I would have everybody take their own and do it at the same time. And I walked everybody through one step at a time. Then that got to be too many. And we just stair-stepped and tried all these different versions. And so once I had that conversation with the appraisal district guy, we had to just scrap that whole method because it was just too much. And so then we started doing it exactly like the other tax consultants do it. We don't get the blue value notice and the PIN number like a regular homeowner would. Now we just go through the process and protest just like a major company does. So The way we do it first is we take, well, let me just continue with the evolution. So in the very beginning, we started doing that. Then I would just have, I would have people sign these forms, and it's the agent authorization form. So if you are a realtor or a tax consultant and you want to protest for somebody, or if you're just somebody who wants to help other people in the community and you've got a real estate license, you don't have to have a tax consultant license. You have to get this agent appointment of agent form. So we started getting these things signed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you stuff on this other screen, but it's impossible for me to show you this stuff and take privacy serious unless I just take a little extra time to, like, I'll just have to blot it out one step at a time. So again, entertainment value is not going to be the highest on this thing. Share screen, and we're going to share the entire screen. Boom. This is what I want to do. All right. So we started getting these appointment of agent forms signed. And in the beginning, we would get these things signed, and we didn't have a clue how to sign them. We just knew if we want to help people with these things, we got to get people to fill these things out. So I just email somebody a link and say, hey, fill this thing out, send it back to me. And then people would send it back in a little bitty, like, they'd take a photo of it and email me the photo. So then I have a JPEG or a PNG photo. And sometimes the photo would be upside down. Sometimes it would be this big. Sometimes it would be this big. It was blurry. So then we would have situations where it would come back and have all sorts of typos in it. And the process to get through that and to get all those processed was an uphill battle. We realized what we really needed to do is we needed to come up with a uniform way of processing these things. And so then the next evolution was we started using Google Apps. And if you use, let's just do this. If you use Google and you go over here and you go to forms, then you can create a Google form. And so that's what we did. We would just create a Google form, and I would ask all the questions that we needed to fill out the blanks on this form. And then it would populate the form. In fact, my gosh, this might be, oh, this is the wrong form. It's very, very similar. This form was a form that was only used because of a lawsuit between O'Connor and Associates. And so it's very, very similar to this form, but this is the actual form. So I apologize to anybody that's taking notes. It's form 50-162. That's the actual form we use. So anyway, we started getting people to fill out our Google form. And then I think that part of the advantage that I have was that I started helping people protest after a lot of technological advances made this easier. So, and since I was doing it for free, I had to figure out how I could facilitate all this on a shoestring budget. And so Google is all open source, and you can find developers all over the world that know how to develop Google Apps scripts and piggyback on this. And honestly, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how to write a word of code, but I do know how to hire people. And so you can go here and go to script editor, and you can write all sorts of code. And it's just amazing when I found a couple developers that were writing code and doing things with this that other developers that knew how to do this, they thought it wasn't possible because of just how advanced it was that these people were, what we were doing. So what we would do is we would have them fill this thing out. When they click submit, it would automatically send the appointment of agent form over to the appraisal district. And that's how we start facilitating. Well, then there got to be too many typos. There were misspelled words. And so we went and started looking up TAD's data. And so if you go here, you can click get data and reports. I think that's where it is. And then there's reports, there's data. So you can go here, and if you go to this property data link, you can find where you can download the entire database of properties, all the residential properties in the entire database. But just when you do that, it ends up being a lot. But what we would do is we would download all that data. And that way, when somebody would get on our form here, let's see, how do we do this? I can't remember all the details, but we would populate the form with the data. I think we had just a basic website that you would look up the number, you would select your account number, and then press enter, and it would pre-populate a bunch of this stuff. And so then using the Google app scripts, then it would, and then it would fill out, the Google sheet, you go to responses, and then it would create a brand new spreadsheet, and then all of the data would dump into a spreadsheet. And then from this point, we wrote some scripts on the Google Sheets where we could come up here again. It's the same thing where you can write code and get it set up so that when you have a button up here and you click the button, it'll start generating a bunch of PDFs, and it can match it with appraisal district info. Anyway, we just started. It was just a process of figuring out, of having a desire to help people. Then I just thought, how bad could this be? If I just say yes and start helping people, I'm going to end up with a mess on my hands, but I can put up with any mess for 1 year. At the end of the year, if it's not sustainable, then I'm going to switch gears and I'll do something else. Won't have to worry about it. And then I'll just tell everybody, hey, I can't help you this year. And that was kind of my thought process. How bad could it be? I can put up with anything for 1 year. Well, then I would just get to a roadblock, figure it out, develop more software, and then and develop the problems, and just keep evolving things. And it just started off, since I was doing it for free, then it was just everything on a shoestring budget, and Google Apps script made that possible. Okay, so then the next step is there's that part of the challenge is just how do you facilitate the process to get people to sign up and to make it so that it's a very functional system where you're not making a big mess. You've got not a lot of typos, and people that are on a tablet or a PC or a Mac or all that. So how do we get it so that it works for everybody? And we would just encounter one problem after another and just keep developing the software, keep developing our systems to make it work. That's one side of it. The other side is the customer service piece, where the amount of questions that we get is just insane. It's a lot of communication. There's no shortcut for that one, by the way. On that side of it, the only way that we're able to process all of the communication is through having a full staff. I pay a full staff. Let's see, at this very moment, I've got 3 people managing our inbox, protest@chandlercrouch.com. And we go from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And in the past week, we've had about 5,400 emails processed through our account. And so there's no shortcut. The shortcut is the long road. And that is, I just train our staff on every bit of everything that I can. Our sales team, our realtors, don't play a role in the nuts and bolts of the protest process. So a lot of the questions that I train our realtors on are just very basic questions. How can I, hold on for just a second. I got a call coming in. I've got somebody, let's see here. Oh, geez. Sorry, there's somebody out and about. I've got somebody out and about helping do some property tax stuff, and she's probably sitting on someone's front porch needing some answers. So I had to forward that call. Anyway, sorry. I can't remember where I was at. Sorry. Customer service. So I train our sales staff on the basic questions. How do I find my account number? How do I sign up to protest? And then all of our agents know how to value properties really well. So all of them can run comps if needed. But as far as the nuts and bolts, inner workings of our system, we take privacy very seriously. So we have a hard wall between our sales staff and our inner office staff to make sure that we're just keeping guards on that. And then that also frees us up to not have to train our sales staff on every little nuancy detail. But I've got my inner circle here. I train them on every bit of it. They We do training every single year, and there's a huge library of videos and quizzes that they have to take in order to catch them up to speed. And then we have a daily meeting every day where we talk about new questions that they don't have the answers to. And so the way it works out is when somebody sends over a question, the first time, my staff's not going to have the answer. Well, I'll answer that question. Well, now my staff has the answer to that question. So anytime someone asks that same question, they're going to be able to answer the question across the board. Well, you only have to do that so many times before you're knocking out about 90% of the questions that people are going to ask. And before you know it, you can have a staff, a pretty hefty staff that's well armed with really good top level answers to be able to help. And then they get to see all these situations. And then when we share information, then we all get to level up on our knowledge of this stuff. So there's no shortcut for that, though. The hard part about it, in the beginning, I used to beg people to not reply to emails, because when you send out an email to 10,000 people, the number of replies that you get of people just saying thank you, it's overwhelming. I mean, it's a ton of emails, and then the people that say thank you or whatever, or received, or whatever minor reply that gets, you can't differentiate between the ones that have a substantive question versus just a reply like that. You until you open the email and check it out. So you can have little preview windows and that sort of thing. When you have multiple people sharing the same inbox, then it gets to be a headache. And then we have issues where there's email deliverability. Google doesn't like you sending more than about 2,000 emails a day. So then that's a whole cat and mouse game. MailChimp has shut us down. It was just, there are logistical things like that. That's what's really made this the most difficult, is just trying to figure out the nuts and bolts. The actual protesting process, that's a different ball game, but it's kind of defined, or I don't know, it has limits on it. And so it's a little easier. So I just wanted to touch on that component of it, because that's an enormous piece. The customer service piece of answering questions is it. Then we have an escalation where, our sales agents, they're going to answer the most basic questions before they kick it over to the protest department. The protest department, they can handle a ridiculous amount of questions until they get to a point where somebody really needs live personal attention. Then I've got one person that picks up the phone and actually calls people that need a little extra help. And then if she can't handle it, then it comes over to me. And so having some kind of escalation structure like that is the only way to handle the volume. So that part of it is really the booger. So let's see, there's that. And then let's talk about, processing the AOA forms. Now let's just get into the protesting part, because I think a lot of people just assume that the actual protesting part is the most time consuming. And I would say it's probably not. It's going to be the customer service piece. I've got 3 remote staff, 1 in-person staff, and me make up the protest team. And the actual protesting part of it is largely just me, because up to this point, oh gosh, I left out my technology team. Up to this point, when you have all of your properties in one spot, then you really need to, it's kind of like doing accounting or something. It's not something where you can have multiple people engaged at the same time. They'll mess it all up. You just got to stay organized. And whenever I do an analysis on one property, I can do the same analysis on all properties, and it doesn't take that much time. The only challenge gets to be when you have so much data, you begin to overload Google Sheets pretty quick. Google Sheets is great because you can have multiple people looking at the same sheet. And there's conveniences, and you can write computer programs, but it's not great for high volume. The next step is you got to go to Microsoft Excel, because it can handle a little bit more volume. But then you start to, when you have enough scripts and computer programs running on top of all that stuff, then it starts to create problems. And so then you have to level up to what you would call a technology stack, and they call it a LAMP stack. And it has to do with, oh gosh, I don't know all of the acronym. It's an acronym. It's like Linux, maybe Apex, then you've got MySQL Server, and then P is probably Python or PHP, and then we do use Python. So all this stuff, look, I don't know anything about computer programming at all. All it is just we encounter a problem, and then I say, how do we solve this problem? I go get advice, I figure it out, then I Google, and then I ask people, and we figure it out one step at a time. All right, so let's get to the protesting part, because that's what everybody wants to know. But all of this other stuff I'm talking about, that's the hard part. That really is the hard part. All right, so let's go to this. Okay, there's no way to explain this other than to just start from square one. So, I'll just pull up the website. So if we go to tad.org, I've already shown you where we download the data. So let's pull this up, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to kind of have to toggle back and forth between this shared screen while I'm hiding sensitive information. Really, here's the weird thing. People, there are situations where like people think that more stuff should be private, but an unbelievable amount of data is publicly available. So, and so then whenever I'm doing tutorials and stuff, to try and figure out which property I'm going to use on my tutorials, it's kind of, I was wondering about that in the beginning, and then I thought, you know what? I'll just use my own house, and it's kind of worked out. And so now I sold this house, but I was thinking, should I use the mayor's house? Like, what's a public figure I could use? And then I just thought, I should just use my own house. And luckily, nothing bad's ever happened. So, and now I've sold this one, and a company bought it, so I could care less now because it's a company. But here we go. So you've got the account number, you've got all these different numbers here, and you've got the problem is that the appraisal district uses they make up their own terms, and they redefine terms that me and you use on an everyday basis, and so that's what creates most of the confusion. This right here, it's abbreviated as total APPR, appraised value is what it really is. This is the market value over here. So appraised value doesn't mean, it doesn't have anything to do with an appraisal. This is one of those terms that they took and just changed the definition of it. So if you say, I need to protest my appraised value, then in the appraisal district, they'll say, oh, you can't protest your appraised value. You have to protest your market value. And it's causes people's minds to melt because it doesn't make any sense because they've changed the definition. But we need all this data. This is not what your house is worth, though. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go behind the scenes and show you what your house, or I'll show you the data that they have behind the scenes. Gosh, I know I'm kind of taking the long road. This is the first time I'm going over this stuff, so I knew it was going to be a bumpy ride. But let's see if I can just get my own property because I don't want to air out anybody else's. Sorry. Give me a second here. So there are other numbers behind the scenes called the indicated values. Those are the numbers that's their actual evidence. Whenever you go to protest, they might actually say, okay, yeah, we know we proposed this value to be your market value. And then you go into protest and they're like, yeah, we don't actually think that's your value. We just think that's just the number that we generated through our mass appraisal system through a cost approach, which is not how anybody in the real world does it, except for maybe an insurance adjuster or something like that. They might do cost approach. But if you were to log in to your online system and look at this page, then you can find the documents section. If you're protesting with me, if I'm protesting for you, you're probably not going to see this. You're not going to be able to get access to it because you're going to, because you've hired me as your agent. And by the way, just for kicks, let me see if I can show you this. I just want to show everybody, I don't want to get your blue value notice at all. In fact, I worked pretty diligently with Jeff Law, the chief appraiser, to get that changed. So here's my email. And so I said, so I talked with Jeff Law. He was very cooperative in trying to change some parts of the system so that we can facilitate some greater needs. And so he said, hey, we had a great conversation. He said, hey, Chandler, do me a favor. Just put that in a letter for me so I can go present that letter to some different legislators and policymakers and that sort of thing. So I made a letter and he went and shopped it around. It says, I'd like to make changes to all the accounts that I represent. Here's all the changes I want to make. One thing that I wanted to do was separate the permissions of who got the value notice and who gets all the other documents. And so what I wanted to do is to say that the property owner does not give authorization to the agent to receive the value notice. And so he went to bat and wasn't able to do that. And because it's just would require a level of change beyond what was possible this year. It's something that we've encountered every single year, but I know that people don't like me getting their value notice and I don't like getting it either. And so anyway, I'm just saying that because I'm showing you something that if I'm protesting for you right now, you're not going to be able to see this stuff because it's just behind the scenes. You don't have, they don't send your value notice, so you're not going to get access to it. But in every single protest, you've got two sets of data. You've got equity data, equity comps and sales comps. Okay. So the equity and sales, those are two different pieces of evidence that, that you can have for the two different types of protests. So you have a market value protest and an unequal protest. The market value protest is saying that you think that your value is not accurate. They've inaccurately proposed the value. So you're going to go in and show them why their data is wrong and why your data is right, and your house would not sell for as much as what they're proposing. That's the type of protest that most people, that gets all the attention. The other type is when you look at your tax value compared to other people's tax values. No matter what it would sell for, if your tax value is not being proposed on an equal basis with other houses that are similar to yours, then you can get your value lowered. And so we focus mostly on the market value protest because that's the one where we can get the most evidence for. And you're going to see the difference in those by right here. You have sales comps. You can see the bottom of that. The equity comps look very similar, but they're completely different. They're determined a completely different way. And the way you know the difference is it says equity right down there. So let's focus on the sales comps for just a second. This is the evidence that we're fighting against whenever we fight your protest. And so the challenge here is when they make up these terms like neighborhood code, and you have no idea what a neighborhood code is, and you shouldn't have any idea what a neighborhood code is because it's a made-up term that only the appraisal district uses. And so what we do to try and poke holes in their evidence is we've dissected this like crazy and figured out what neighborhood code is. And we figured out how they calculate it and how it's flawed. And I'll show you how we do that. If you go to tad.org and you go to the forms area, then you can find something. It was a lot harder to do in the past. Let's see here. Now, if I Control F and then put manual, then you'll find the residential appraisal manual. So in this manual, then you get to see all of the inner workings of how the appraisal district determines their values. And this sucker is complicated, but it decodes everything. And in fact, they do a pretty darn good job of telling you what all these terms mean and the timelines and on and on and on, how they calculate all of the values. And in fact, they have, watch this. This is going to blow your mind. Oh, probably not blow your mind, but blew my mind. They have every single neighborhood code listed right there in 3-point font. And so if you just care enough, you can dive in here and figure out all of this stuff. You can figure out how do they adjust all the properties to, when they do a blanket adjustment and they come up with some kind of arbitrary value. It's not really arbitrary. It's just a value determined using rules that don't make any sense to human beings, but they make perfect sense to a computer, and they line perfectly with the property tax code. The property tax code is just completely screwed up. So let's see here. So I want to show you this on McCain. There's a property, unfortunately for the appraisal district, um, the property that we ended up having a lot of trouble with on the appraisal district was a property that makes a perfect example for just about for a talk like this. So let's go in here. I'm going to just show you this. What most realtors do is they don't show you comps that look like this. What a realtor does is for just a second, let me just show you what we're looking at. This is the subject property. And then they compare the subject property to three different comps on one page. And then they have a second page where they will compare it to three more properties. In total, 6 properties if they have enough data. And so, but you can look, each one of these properties takes up one comp. They can fit 4 properties on a page. All right. If you go to a realtor and look on the MLS, then you're going to get something that looks like this. This is one single property, and it barely fits on 2 pages. It actually spills over just a bit on the 3rd page, but this is one property. You should just look at that. That's probably 200 different data points. And so when the appraisal district has their evidence and they're using whatever, I don't know how many data points that is, maybe 15 data points. And then a realtor or a homeowner brings the comps that they got from a realtor and they're bringing in 200 data points. What this does is this gives the appraisal district a lot of information to pick apart the homeowner's comps. And they'll find all sorts of problems with the comps they're pulling in. And so they'll say, I'm sorry, this property looks like it needs TLC. This property is in a different subdivision. And they'll say you should have brought in a property that was in the same exact neighborhood code instead of 2 different subdivisions. Well, this is where people that spend a lot of time and energy, they'll walk into a protest hearing with great, well thought out data and then just get roasted because they don't know these unspoken rules and unspoken words, the stuff that the rules that are written without teaching anybody. So what I've done is I'll take a neighborhood code. What that is it's probably one subdivision and then a few other subdivisions cobbled together around it. And because those subdivisions, for whatever reason, the appraisal district thinks that they might be comparable. So they just kind of create their own little mini region to try and get like kind properties together. Well, that system is flawed. So when you actually pay attention to it, you'll find out that some of those subdivisions they have lumped together inside the same neighborhood code, they don't actually compare. Well, when you go protest, if you know what I've just told you, then you're going to know more than most people sitting in the room. A lot of people in a protest hearing will think that a neighborhood code is one subdivision, and it may not be. So if I decided that I wanted to get properties from 2 different subdivisions, but I didn't have a but it didn't have a matching neighborhood code, then I was at a disadvantage. So what I started doing was I started doing an analysis on their neighborhood codes. And if I could tell that they were using comparable sales from multiple different subdivisions, then I would just disclose that to them, and I'd do a neighborhood code report to show that, hey, inside this neighborhood code, they're not all in the same subdivision. There's like 20 different subdivisions inside that neighborhood code. So then when I brought my evidence in and I had comps that were in 3 different subdivisions, then I could say, I've got comps in 3 different subdivisions, but y'all do too. And so and if I show them inside their neighborhood code, it's varied, then all of a sudden the appraisal district will start to look at my evidence as valid instead of just thinking it was off. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining that right. It's kind of complicated, but that's what we do. So that's just the neighborhood code. That's just the subdivision. We're not talking about, there's so much more information that's not included in their comps. Like what's the distance between the subject property and the comp? They don't have that information on their form. What if sometimes, especially in lakefront properties or areas where there aren't a lot of sales, in really low end property values and high end property values, there will be very few sales. So sometimes the appraisal district will go 2 miles away to find a comp. Well, if they don't show the distance away from the subject property, then, and they don't show a map on on a map where that property is, then when it's put together in a nice little form like this, it makes it look like they could be comparable properties, when in reality they could be very far apart. So when you start to analyze their data like this, then you can determine that the comps that they're using are not good. And so as it turns out, if you want to, you can actually write a computer code that'll do all of that for you. You can determine proximity. You can measure distance, but you can just figure out the latitude and longitude of every single property and then measure the distance. You can write a computer program and put that in a spreadsheet. You can do that. You can look at their neighborhood code, figure out how many different subdivisions are in that neighborhood code. You can do that with a computer program. So the question that I have as somebody protesting is not, can I come up with an accurate value? Okay. That's the mistake that a lot of people make that are trying to do this for a lot of people. They're saying, how can I come up with an accurate value? That's not the question. The question is the appraisal district's data good enough to justify the value that they're proposing? That's a question. We've got two different, so that's one question. Then we have a question of, if it appears that it is, then can I find any other data that might appear to be better in some ways? So when you do that, that's a far different set of questions than what's an accurate value. Okay. It's just, hey, can I figure out the rules of this game? Can I figure out, like, there are some other, I can just keep going through. Let me just go through this because I think this is going to be valuable. I think there are going to be a lot more people watching this that might want to take this and use it in your own protesting. You're not necessarily trying to protest for, 30,000 people like me. You're just trying to use it for your own protest. So here's what I've done on a big scale. I've just taken their comps. I realize there's only about 15 different data points here. And then I pull an MLS report for all of the comps that they're going to use. And I analyze it and say, what are they not telling me that actually exists that I can find on an MLS report that they're not showing me on this report? And then I start looking at it and trying to decide, is the information that they're leaving out something that would affect the value of the property? For instance, is the property adjacent to a golf course? Is it adjacent to water? Is it, has the property been recently remodeled? You can find that out right here. A lot of times they'll say, newly installed, hardwood floors. Does it have hardwood floors? Has it been renovated lately? There are all these questions that you can look at. How many stories is it? You don't know in this data. You don't know how many stories the property is. You don't know if it's on a cul-de-sac. Usually, actually, look, here's a perfect example. Properties on a cul-de-sac sell for a little bit more than properties not on a cul-de-sac because they have less traffic. They're a little bit more desirable. The appraisal district doesn't give that quite as much value, but I know that plays into value. So this one says court, but if it wasn't in the street name, you'd never know it. You don't know how many stories this is. There are all sorts of things. I can just go through here and analyze this really quick. So let's see. So we've got the quality. It says average quality. That's a function largely based on price range. That's basically it. It's just looking at price for the most part. Condition, they come up with their own measurement for condition. It doesn't have anything with the condition. It doesn't have anything to do with the analysis somebody had when they walked through the property. They're just looking at this effective year number, which is a completely made up number. Compare that to the year built. Okay. So what happens is, if a property was built in 1950, but the homeowner did a complete remodel in 2013, then what happens is the appraisal district will look at that and say, well, you just remodeled the house in 2013, therefore we're going to adjust the effective year to be 2013. So then if the effective year says 2013, then what they're going to do is they're going to start looking at other houses that actually have an actual year built in 2013, and they'll compare it against those properties. So that's just one example. On paper, you can put it in a grid like this, and if you don't know what's really going on, you can get blindsided by something like that. But to dispel that, all you have to do is show a front photo of the house or that sort of thing. The other thing you can do is you can look at this condition. It says good. Then if you're in a protest hearing and you ask them, hey, how did you come up with that condition designation? Let me ask you, when's the last time somebody looked at the inside of that property? And let me show you how you can find that out. You can go, okay, you can go back to that documents page and you can go to the property card. On this card, you can download that and find all sorts of information. Now, again, this is, if you're doing it in mass, this is stuff that you can get and download into a spreadsheet, okay? And so then you can write a computer code to analyze it all. But you've got permit, it's inspected. It was inspected in 2019, but it was an office review. This wasn't a field review. Nobody drove by this house. So they did an office review in 2019, and that's how they adjusted some of this stuff. So if I'm in a protest hearing and I get that information, then in the moment, I'll say, hey, look, the condition of my property is not good. It's below average. Let me ask you, how did you come up with the condition? And then they'll have some kind of answer if they even have an answer. And then you can say, well, it looks to me like the last time that this property was inspected was in 2019. It was an office review. Since then, we've had some property condition issues, and that's the reason why this is outdated. And it's not accurate. So you can just go into that. Somebody's coming to my office. What's up? What's up, Leanne? All right. Appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're awesome. See you. All right. So anyway, I'm just kind of going to continue to go into detail about how this is done. So that's one thing that you can find issues with the effective year. Go to the MLS report and find how to poke holes in that. And I can just continue to go through all of the different fields on here and tell you how I find errors in their data. But it would just take all day if I did that. Here's one thing I want to just show you. Here's a little tip. I would love to find an example of this. Yeah, here's a pretty good example. Okay, so down here is this comp object index value score. In that residential appraisal manual that I was showing you, they tell you how they calculate this. It's not the easiest thing to figure out, but if you read their formulas on how they calculate this, this is like a confidence score. You can do the same calculations and figure this stuff out. Well, here's the problem with this. This is generally looked at as how strong are those comps? How similar is the subject property compared to these comps? And I would make an argument that the amount of adjustments that have to be made are in direct correlation with how accurately matched they are. So let me explain for a second what the adjustments are if you don't know. So you've got the subject property is 1,943 square feet. That's the subject property. Then you have the comparable that they're comparing you to is less square footage. Well, that wouldn't be fair if they didn't adjust for that square footage, because a house that's bigger, it should sell for more, right? So instead of doing an actual price per square foot where you take the sales price, you divide it by the square footage, that doesn't, a calculation like that doesn't take into account land size or pool or how big, how long the hallways are. The value of a hallway per square foot is not as much as the value of a square foot in a bathroom. So when you start looking at the square footage, you do a different price per square foot calculation. And the main value, the main carrier of value there is the land. And so you've got, they do $65 a square foot. That's supposed to calculate only the cost per square foot of the improvement. And then they take the land and have a completely different valuation. So on this one, the value of the land is $65,000 for this particular lot. And so they're separating out the improvement from the land. That's why they do that. That's why they have the land value and the improvement value to be separate numbers, is because so they can do these adjustments and come up with some kind of theoretical number to say, if this house had larger square footage, what would it have sold for? And so once they do that square footage number, they do this adjustment, they come through and they'll adjust all these other numbers, and then they take the sales price, and after they calculate the sales price, they'll do the math and add that to that, and then they get this adjusted sales price number. All right, here's the point I wanted to make. You would think that this confidence number would basically mean that it has fewer adjustments. Well, it's not the case. So if I look at this, I would say, okay, so this has a lower number. So this property should be very, very similar to the subject property. It's similar in every way except the square footage. It's just a little bit smaller. Well, let's add it all together. I don't even know what the math is. I didn't do a ballpark math in my head. I probably should have. So I'm going to look at the, I can't remember the terminology, but I'm just going to add these together to get the total amount of adjustments. So it's $3,084.50. That number is less than this number up here. So comp 1 actually had more adjustments than comp 2, yet the confidence number here, the comp object index number, is higher on this one than it is on this one. And so if I'm in a protest hearing, I'll say, guys, y'all are screwing this up. The subject property is more similar to this property, to comp 2, than it is comp 1. That you should have these properties flip-flopped, and this confidence number should be less. Well, the confidence number actually, it determines the weightage you give this. So the weight you give each one of these. So it's going to be, the subject property is going to be valued a lot closer to $336,000 than it will be to $319,000, because this number is lower, and that means that comp 1 carries more weight. So the fact that this one's in position 2 matters a whole heck of a lot, especially when the difference in price is, you got a pretty good chunk of change here. This was almost $320,000. This was $336,000. So what is that? About $13,000 more. That's a pretty significant difference. So I would say, I'm sorry, y'all got those in the wrong order. I put comp number 2 in position number 1, and that would bring this value down because of the weight that it gives. Okay, I can tell I'm already talking Greek to a lot of people here, because this is just inside baseball nuancy stuff. But this is how I go through and I dissect all this stuff. Once you understand how these numbers are calculated, you can write a computer program that will help you do a quick analysis of all of them. And so if there are a number of different things that you can do, let me just give you one more example before I switch gears, because I think that my examples are actually probably going to be more beneficial than me explaining kind of the business end of things, of how I do it. Because the business end of things are only going to really matter if you're trying to do thousands of these. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to kind of cut to the chase on some of this. I'm pulling up some properties on another sheet. Give me a second. The house that I'm about to show you is a house that's actually been torn down. So I'm perfectly happy giving you this information and showing you. And by the way, these my video will probably get yanked off YouTube and everything, because they don't like you showing addresses. They think you're doxing somebody. So let me just show you this. This is an actual set of data. So this is the appraisal district's comps of a property. By the way, you might recognize this property. When the appraisal district filed complaints on me, it was on this exact property. I went and I protested the value of this thing from let's see, $900,000 down to $800,000. And then I went and listed it for sale for $2.5 million. Well, what they don't tell you is that this property actually contained 3 different account numbers. And I was only protesting one of those account numbers. But whenever I went and listed it for sale, my property that I was listing for sale contained 3 different appraisal district accounts. And so if you just look, it was the difference. It's an apples and oranges comparison. So in the private notes of the MLS listing, it just says this: the rooms, acreage, and price advertised are for both homes. There was 7308 John McGain and 7316 John McGain. So what it was it was an apples and oranges comparison. The property I was protesting was 1 acre, 1 house and 1 acre, and what I went and sold was 2 houses on 5 acres of land, like 6 barns and a couple ponds. So it was apples and oranges, but this property illustrates a great point. Here's the appraisal district's evidence against me. They only had 3 properties because there was lack of data there. There wasn't enough data. So they only had 3 properties. That's the minimum number of properties that they can use. And then you can start looking at the comps. It's just really wacky. You've got this one was built in the year 2000. The subject property is built in the year 2000. Dang, my screen keeps jumping. The subject was built in the year 2000. This first comp was built in 1987. So that's supposed to be their strongest comp. The subject property was listed in good condition, and the first comp was listed in average. I don't put much weight in the accuracy of that, but that's how they have it listed. So that's what I'm arguing against. And then on and on, you can just look at all this stuff and look at, you've got significant problems with these comps. There are issues all over the place. One way to identify the issues is just look at these adjustment values. This right here, there's a $257,000 adjustment on the land. It's a completely different number of acres that they're comparing me to. This comp 3 is much, much larger land size. Comp 2 is much, much smaller. It was $180,000 less. So this is what the appraisal district's data looks like. After I do all of my analysis and I figure out if I'm going to escalate a property to a formal hearing, then I don't bring in a full agent MLS report like this for them to pick apart. What I do is I fight fire with fire, and I actually format my comps to look exactly like the appraisal district's comps. And then I reproduce the appraisal district's comps so I can find all the problems and line it out like this. So this is a document that I created. This is an exact replica of the appraisal district's data of their comps. I just recreated it for a rebuttal in my system. What I did was I analyzed all this stuff and I put all the data that they're not showing anybody. And so the year built isn't comparable. And here's the issue with that. I don't really care about when the year built is. I just care about, are the properties similar? So you could have a property that was built in the year 2000 and compare it to a house that was built in year 2022, but the quality of construction is completely different. So then the year built isn't the biggest determining factor, it's quality of construction. And then you could also have a house that was built many years apart, but they look similar on the outside. The quality of construction is about the same, and it's all updated materials. And so what I'm saying here is that the quality of construction is the issue. I point out the fact that the condition is not the same as the subject property. This one is 0.9 miles away from the subject property. If I could limit my comparable search to a half-mile radius, and that's what I would do. What I ended up doing in the end is I figured out all their neighborhood codes. And so I actually just try and play the rules by their game, and I will focus on to their neighborhood code and see if I have enough comps in the neighborhood code. And I just focus there first. But what I do is I just show, even though the neighborhood code is the same across the board, this is one of those examples where the comp is in a different subdivision than the subject property. You can see that's the way across the board. Look at this. Comp 2 is 1 mile away from the subject property. So comp 2, the land is 2.9 acres. The subject property is 1.7 acres. Over here, the land is at 0.52 acres, and the subject is 1.7 acres. So when you start to analyze all this stuff, you realize that you've got to point out the differences. You can do it with a computer program, some kind of massive analysis like I do, or you can do the analysis all on your own and try and figure this stuff out on your own. So I think when you're doing 30,000 properties like I'm doing, there's no way for me to do the analysis by hand. But I'm still going to be more effective than most people if I know the rules and I know all the science behind it, and I know how to write the programs that can do an analysis like this. It takes a tremendous amount of time and energy, but it's nothing compared to what it would take if I did a full in-person protest on every single property. I'm just not going to do that. I couldn't do that. It's impossible. I think everybody kind of understands that. But that's how I do it. I do this analysis in a nutshell. I produce evidence like this if it ends up getting escalated to an in-person formal hearing. But the other thing that I do is I actually don't take most of the properties to an in-person formal hearing. Here's what I do. I do the same thing that I tell you to do. The first thing that I do right off the bat is I try to determine if there's, I negotiate with the appraisal district to see if the appraisal district will take a low ball offer. If they'll take a low ball offer, then we'll agree to the value and move on, and no protest hearing needed. If they won't agree to the lowest offer that the evidence will support, then I'll escalate it, okay? But if they're going to agree to the lowest offer evidence will support, then we just agree to it. Nobody needs to go to a hearing if they're going to be agreeable. And as a matter of fact, they are very agreeable most of the time, especially when you have 30,000 properties. They don't want me to go to a hearing on all those, okay? And they'll probably be agreeable to you on yours. They're a lot of times pretty good people behind the scenes that are just kind of shackled by this wacky system. Let's say they don't agree to the value that I'm proposing, and then I analyze it, and I'm doing the analysis on this to look at how the strength of their comps, the strength of my comps. Are there any outliers I can throw out? All these different analysis, and if there's no evidence to support further reduction, then I won't take it to a formal hearing. If there's no evidence to support further reduction, then it doesn't do any good to argue. You would just then what I usually do is sign some kind of agreement that will preserve the homeowner's right to still go to arbitration if they choose to do that. But if somebody wants to go that route, I usually would recommend it in certain specific cases, very few usually. But I will, once in a blue moon, I'll say, hey, this wasn't a fair hearing. They're not agreeing to what you should get. You should take this to arbitration if you care. And I don't think I've had one person take me up on it, but still. All right. I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions here. Then I'm going to dive back in the nerdy stuff. Told you the entertainment value on this isn't going to be really high. I want to give nuts and bolts. There's so many people that always ask, how do you do it? Look, I can give a much better speech if it's a speech I've given 10,000 times. I'm kind of like, the way that I am able to do all this stuff is because I can juggle a lot at once. And I can handle a lot of volume of things, different moving parts. Well, part of the downside of that is I might have 3 different gears moving in my head, and I want to say 3 different things at the same time. Instead of finishing one thought, moving to the next in very linear fashion, I give you a couple details off of each gear before I end up finishing the story. I get that, but this is what you get. All right, let's see what Melanie Singer says. What's up, Melanie? Oh gosh, let's not even talk about Mac numbers. Cannot process the numbers in spreadsheets fast enough. Yeah, it's death. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many times I have been sitting at this computer at 4 a.m. and I click cut or paste, and I'm just sitting there watching the wheel of death spin and spin and spin and spin, just waiting for the paste to show up. Oh my gosh, I've spent more hours of my life waiting for a computer like that. It's just total death. Eventually, you have to move to MySQL server. All right. Liz says, so my property is compared to houses a few blocks away. They have sidewalks. We don't. We are a 0 lot line. The rest of the subdivision is not 0 lot line. The comparison in neighborhood comparison is 3 blocks away. So here's the thing, Liz. This is part of the thing that frustrates me. When you have comps like this, where the appraisal district proposes a land value, just like this, and that land value is presented as though it is a settled matter, then I have a problem with that. When we are in the process of protesting the value, if you're going to give me the evidence why you think your value is accurate, but that number itself, your evidence isn't up for scrutiny, it's presented as a settled matter, then I think that that's a flaw in the system. So all you have to do is look at how your properties are valued. Here's the crazy thing. They will bracket land size. So you'll have a property that's 0.24 acres and compared to a property that's 0.3 acres compared to a property's 0.32 acres, and they'll say that the value on all of those is $90,000 for the land, no matter the size. That's not reality. We know that people pay more for larger lots, and so that may be the case with your situation here. Is they may not, they might have not done the price per acre accurately, and that may or may not have an effect on your protest hearing. But if I was you, I would go ahead and do that math and bring that as one of my bullet points that I would hit in a protest hearing. Do the price per acre and then explain to them how it's off. And so what I would do is I say, hey, look, your appraisal district, your values are pretty good, and they work generally for all properties, just not mine. And here's the reason why. And then you show them. All right. Ralph says, what's up, Ralph? Many multifamily owners end up using an attorney to sue the district. Can you comment on arbitration success? Yeah, I will, Ralph. And you're exactly right. I was just railing on this last night at this event that I was speaking at. In fact, this is one of the biggest hot point issues that we have. There are large, big business commercial properties that are significantly undervalued. Millions upon millions of dollars in property value are not being taxed. And look, you're not going to hear me advocating for somebody else to pay higher tax, because why do I want somebody else to pay a higher price? I could care less. I just want the break. Give me a tax break. I don't care what he's doing. Just cut me a break. Here's the problem. If millions upon millions of dollars of value are not being taxed, then guess what? That means I end up picking up the bill for that. And so now I do have a problem with that. It's a matter of fairness in the system, uniform and equality in the system. There's a uniform and equal protest that we have, but unfortunately, people are not valued the same. They're valued in proportion to the amount of money that you have. And that's really what it is. So that commercial property owners, all they have to do to win a protest is to go sue the appraisal district. The appraisal district will be on the hook for all the attorney fees, all the cost of the entire lawsuit. So they can't afford to fight all those lawsuits. What they would have to do is settle the lawsuits. And so they become very, very negotiable once a lawsuit has been filed, and then that negotiation process starts. Well, here's the thing, Ralph. That's way too expensive for a residential property owner. Believe it or not, there are a lot of property tax laws that are written pro property owner, and including the ability to arbitrate. Arbitration costs you $500 up front as a deposit. If you're successful, you get $450 of that back. After you file for arbitration, the same rules apply. So the appraisal district does not want to go into an arbitration hearing and risk having to spend money if they lose. All the homeowner has to do is get $1 reduced, then the appraisal district's on the hook for that $450. They don't want that to happen. So the comptroller facilitates this process. They'll send you a document right before the arbitration hearing. And in that document, it basically says, hey, this is your opportunity to go back and negotiate with the appraisal district. And wouldn't you know, the appraisal district gets a lot more negotiable during that pre-arbitration phase. Let's see here. Property owner evidence affidavit. Let me show you. So here's what the big boys do. Every single property owner has to file a protest. Even if you know you're just going to sue, or you're just going to, oh gosh, you know what I just realized, Ralph? This is what I'm going to do on another one of my little live streams. So I'm going to just hit it real quick. Just fill out this property owner evidence affidavit, send that in, wait for them to send you the results of the hearing. Oh, whoops, I thought I was sharing it. Wait for them to send you the results of the hearing, then file for arbitration. And then that's when the real fun begins. But yeah, it's definitely, if you want to be super effective, and fight like the big boys, then that's what you do. There's going to be a live protest event. I think it's on Monday, where I'm going to talk about this in detail, and how to really stick it to them. Let's see what Jim Bruce says. My mortgage bank pay my property tax and home insurance too, so the bank increases my So this is just an escrow shortage. So if the property tax bill only comes once a year, it goes and it's applied to your escrow account. If there's not enough money sitting in your escrow account, then your mortgage company will still pay the property tax bill. It's just that it will go negative. So you'll have a shortage, and then they'll say, hey, you need to pay your entire escrow shortage right now, or we'll give you a 12 months to pay it back. And so, so that's just how property taxes are paid. If you didn't have a mortgage, then you'd have to write a physical check for your property tax bill. But here's a tip on that. If you have a escrow shortage, then a lot of times you can just ask your mortgage company if they will allow you to spread out that shortage over a 2-year period instead of a 1-year period. It's not going to do anything to alleviate the burden of what you owe. It's just going to reduce the amount of the monthly payment you're going to have to pay. The next year, you could have another escrow shortage, but hopefully you could figure out something if you're able to buy a little bit more time. Hopefully that helps. All right, let me dive into some of the juiciest juice that I've got here. If you have any other questions, go ahead and post them. I told you this one's going to be kind of relaxed. I'm not putting on a show today. It's just me and you sitting here talking about all this stuff. And I'm just trying to teach a little bit about how I do things on a larger scale. I hope that it's kind of like I've given you several nuggets on how to analyze this stuff on a mass scale. There are several things that I do to leverage time to make all this possible. And so here's the real trick. I've shown you a lot of stuff. Now I'm going to show you the nerdiest thing you're going to see all day. Here we go. All right. Everything I do, a lot of stuff I do is in a spreadsheet. So let me pull the spreadsheet over. I think I've got everything that is really sensitive hidden, and I hope you can read this. I'm going to try and get it to where you don't have to read it too much. Boom. Here we go. Here's a spreadsheet. Let me increase the size of the sucker. So whenever I'm analyzing these properties, and look, this is not for the average person. What I'm going over now is how I do it. I'm not saying you should do it this way. If you are a property tax consultant wanting to level up your game a little bit, then this little webinar that I've got is great. If you're a homeowner, the next few steps are just going to give you some kind of idea that we're not faking it over here. That's all this is going to tell you. We're just not faking it. And I hope by the end of this, you kind of will get the gist of that. Then if you see somebody talking trash about me online, you can say, I don't think he's faking it. All right. So there are two different main things that we need to look at whenever I decide, am I going to escalate this to the next level? Am I going to go to a formal hearing on this? Or is there evidence to support a reduction and the appraisal district's just not agreeing to it? Or what do I propose that the appraisal district should value? We've got to look at two things. One is the strength of the comps. And by that, I will say that I should probably change what I'm saying there to say it's the accuracy of the comps. The accuracy of the comps is a big deal. The next one is the amount of potential reduction. Those are the two main things. Then you've got the appraisal district's comps, you got my comps, and you'll have a set of sales comps that are appraisal district and mine. Then you'll have a set of equity comps that are appraisal districts and mine. Okay. So, and you're going to analyze both sets of comps using the same kind of analysis where you're looking at the accuracy and the potential reduction amount. Okay. I can definitely find properties that would support a reduction on every single house. But if my properties are 3 miles away from the subject property and the appraisal district's properties are within the same block as the subject property, then it doesn't matter how low my house values are. If anybody that's looking at those comps is going to say your comps aren't accurate enough. Yes, you might be showing me room for a reduction, but they're not accurate enough. Why didn't you use the properties that are on the same block as the subject property? Why are you not using the appraisal district's comps? So you got to answer those questions. It's not enough to just find the lowest comps possible. You have to find the lowest comps possible that are somewhat comparable. Oh gosh, this is reminding me, I need to show you something else before I show you this. I'm going to just give you a peek here. I think property tax. Ooh, this is good. I'm going to show you. I promised I would show you secrets. Very few people are going to get anything out of this. This is for my competitors to steal everything I got. If you can hit pause long enough, slow the video down to like 2 seconds, really, really slow. Here's what I do. I don't know how to give good advice to my nobody taught me how to build tax software. So what I did is I went in and I created a system, a communication system with my programmers. And so if you go to Google Docs, you can hit this button right over here, and this gives you an outline. Okay. And the way that you control this, you click this right here. Let me increase the size of this thing. If you click that button, then you can hit this button right here, and you can change the formatting of the text. And when you change this formatting, it changes the outline. See how this one's not as indented? And then, so what it does is it gives us almost like an index where we can go through and we can start talking about different revisions that need to be made in the software. So I'll start off and I'll say, okay, these are revisions and to-dos. So create an evidence upload function so that users can review and edit the report before finalizing. So we were able to implement that this year. And here's the process that we did to develop that. So, and then we have all these different use cases where there's a blank address is not, anyway, whatever. It just goes on and on. I don't know what I'm going to show you right off the bat. I don't know what's in here, but the thing that I wanted to show you is, let's see here. So we've got, and then we've got how we produce our evidence. We've got, here's the rebuttal evidence, and then here's the order of it. Here's all the different documents that we provide. Then we have a system where it compiles all those things. Let's go. Let me hit this right here. Let's see. Sales comp report. Sales comp selection. Let's see here. Escalations. All right. So here's what I do. The first thing that I do is I analyze the appraisal district's comps. I take all of their comps. I run it through my system. And I look to see, did the appraisal district's comps fit in the plus to minus 10% range of square footage, the plus to minus 15% square footage, or plus or minus 20% square footage? I figure out how much padding they gave their year built. Were their comps plus or minus 5 years of being year built? Was it plus or minus 10 years? I figure out the distance between the subject property and the comp. And by the time I analyze every single factor of the appraisal district's comps, then I can start to tell how accurate the appraisal district's comps are. Okay. So if the appraisal district used only comps built within 5 years, then guess what? Whenever I produce my comps, I'm going to produce my comps plus or minus 5 years. And then I might fudge just a bit and say, okay, the appraisal district used plus or minus 5 years. I'm going to go plus or minus 7 years on my comps. So what I'm doing is I'm analyzing the accuracy of the appraisal district's comps, but then I'm looking, wouldn't it be a shame if there's a property that was just built 6 years different than the subject property, and it was substantially lower value, but it wasn't included because it was 1 year off? Well, I'm just looking at that saying, if I'm looking for an advantage in this, There is no rule book that says I have to use the same criteria that the appraisal district uses. In fact, it would be totally stupid for me to do that. All I'm looking for is, can I present a plausible set of evidence to show somebody that my comps are accurate and it justifies a value reduction? That's all I'm looking for. So after I analyze all the appraisal district's comps, I determine, does it fit into escalation 0? Meaning, does it fit within these different parameters? I'll look at the lot size. If the subject is within this lot range, then what tolerance am I going to have on the comps? This takes a heck of a lot of trial and error to figure this stuff out. Okay. But right now, somebody's sitting there thinking, why the hell are you doing this for free, bro? Look, let's skip that part of the conversation, please. Just don't remind me. All right. The point is when the subject property is within 0.35 to 0.5, when it's in that range, the amount of tolerance that you got to have is different, because a house that's 0.7, it's like, you see what I'm saying? It's like the smaller you get, the more consequential the size of the lot is. You can't just have the same padding. Okay. You got to create different padding. All right. The point is, when I analyze the appraisal district, do their comps fit within this tight box right here? If they do, then my comps are going to fit almost. Look. Here's a perfect example. If the subject is greater than is in this range right here, then then my comps, I'm going to limit to this range. So I am going a little bit more aggressive, but I can't go nuts with it. Okay. I got to just look for a property that's just a little bit bigger, or a little bit smaller, but not out. It can't be unreasonable. All right. So here's the thing. I've got these different escalations. I have different criteria. I'm looking at how far did the appraisal district go? How far can I go? And I figure out what level did it land in? Did it land in 3B or 4A? And then once we start getting crazy, then we'll start getting down here to escalation 5 and looking at this stuff. Like if, I don't know, it just gets outlandish. If the appraisal district is using really horrible comps, then I'll start looking, within a 4-mile radius. Okay. If they go within if they are going 3 miles away, then I'm going to start going 3 miles away. And then you got to start to figure out, is the appraisal district, do they view land size, year built, subdivision, or date range as more important? When you can answer those questions, then you can figure out how to bracket their comps, so you can figure out the accuracy piece to those two questions. You got to get the accuracy piece nailed, or else it's not going to matter. You can do all this manually, but when you're doing 30,000 properties, you got to get scientific about it, or else it's going to take too much time. I'll never be able to do it. All right. Then you've got the presentation side. I'm just going to flip through here. So fields that I need. Oh, so check this out. Let's go to this. All right. Here's what we're going to do. Once I go through that to figure out which comps I'm going to use as my evidence, then I just come up with a scoring system that scores my comps and scores their comps, and it's going to score them in two different ways. Number 1, accuracy. Number 2, potential reduction amount. And that's what it is. So I've got this kind of color coded. This is, I'm looking at several different things that could indicate to me that there is a potential for a reduction. What I do is I populate this material to look at the market value for 2 years ago. So this was last year's data. If I'm looking at this, I'm looking at 2019. What was the market value? Then we're going to look at what was the distance between 2019 and 2020. Well, there it is. And I just come up with that. 2019 to 22. So it changed. Let's see, market value change. It was, I don't know if I'm doing this right. Hold on. Let's see here. What do I have? I'm looking at whatever. There was a 16.8% change between two numbers. Okay. So it's between 2020 and 2021, it dropped 16.8%. If it dropped that much, then that tells me something. I don't know. Like, you got to ask, well, what does that tell you? It tells me that there's probably a successful protest, or maybe the evidence in that neighborhood is shoddy. So if there's a big difference, then I'm going to use that as an indicator that maybe there's something quirky going on with this property. So I measure the distance between 2019, 2020, and I just look at the analysis. Sometimes the value will remain flat like this. Look at this, flat value 4 years in a row. Well, what does that tell me? That tells me this year, if they propose a really high value, then it could just be making up for lost time. So that alone might not be an indicator. It's just one indicator of all this crazy stuff. Then I'll look at the appraisal district's comps. And remember, I said there's market value. So there's two different types of protests. There's an an unequal protest and a market value protest. Okay. You got two totally different sets of data. All I care about is, does either set of data justify a reduction? And really what I'm going to look at is, out of both sets of data, which one is the lowest number? Which one has the lowest value? Or is it the proposed value? Because the proposed value is a completely different calculation. What I do is I look at the lowest of all three of those values. Sometimes it's equity, sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's market. Okay. Then I look at the lower of the two, equity or sales comps. And in this case, the equity comps were lower. If the market value is the lowest out of the three, and then out of sales versus equity, if equity is lower, that tells me the odds of me getting a reduction on this are very, very low, because for equity comps, they're using the appraisal district's own data to justify their value. They're going to win that battle most of the time because it's their own data, and there's a ton of data. That means that instead of just using the sales that occurred within the past year, they're going to get to use every single, okay, if they're just looking in a subdivision and we're doing market value comps, then all you're going to get to do is look at the sales that occurred in that subdivision. It might be 5. If you're looking at the equity comps, you're looking at tax values of all those properties. That means every single property in the subdivision can qualify. So you might be looking at 300 comps, 300 properties. So the odds that you're going to find out of those 300, the odds that you're going to find 9 properties, which is what you need for equity comps, if the odds you're going to find 9 of those that are really, really similar to the subject is pretty high. It's the appraisal district's own data. It's an uphill battle. If the proposed value is the lowest out of all 3, and then next in line is equity, guess what? I'm probably not going to take this one to a hearing if I can't get the appraisal district to agree to a reduction right off the bat. So, but then I keep doing analysis here. The lower of the two. So then I do I subtract. No, I look at which one's the lower of the two. I just put all this information in. Then I look at, well, what should I offer? If I'm just going to offer one of those 3s, what would it be? Or what did the appraisal district offer me? It's going to be market value. Then here we go. So here's an analysis that I do just on the equity comps, because I analyze each data set independently. So the equity indicated value, you're going to find that number on your documents here. Let me find. If you go to your documents, again, if I'm representing you, you're not going to find this. But you go click this button, get your equity comps, then it's going to be, let's see here. I've got it already. I think it's going to be, those are sales comps. Here's equity comps right there. This is your equity indicated value. That's what they actually think it's worth. So that's where you're going to start. That's the number that I'm putting in the spreadsheet. That's what I meant to say. Let's see here. Where is my spreadsheet? There it is. All right. So I put that number. Then what I do is I just look at it and I'm like, what if we remove one property? So typically they're going to have 9 comps, which that number's on here somewhere. Okay. Well, dadgummit. Okay. Uh, it's not going to matter. It's not like you're going to understand what I'm talking about anyway. Well, anyway, one of the analysis that I do is to look at, um, number of equity comps right here. So I look at, how many equity comps do they have? Check this out. 9 is how many they're supposed to have. If they can find 9 equity comps, they got 9. If it has less than 9 equity comps, that tells me right off the bat, their comps are not accurate. And it's open season for me to go win on this protest. So that's just one indicator that I'm going to win. If they have less than 9, then it's game on. Okay. So that's the first thing that I'll look at. But then I think, well, what if we were to take one of those comps out and recalculate it? The way you calculate the equity comps is you use the median value. If you have 9 of them, then you're going to go with the one. There's 2 in the. You're going to go with the middle, or you're going to take an average of the 2 middle ones. And so, but I asked the question: what would happen if you took out the highest one? Then how does that bump the order? And it's actually a different calculation than what I'm saying out loud, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So I do equity indicated value minus the high. What's the margin? What's the distance between the highest and the next in line? That one was an $82,000 difference between the equity indicated value and the highest. That tells me that there's a good amount of room there. That might mean that there's a potential for a reduction. So then I'll look at, well, what's the dollar amount? Doesn't matter. $82,000 on a $1 million home, drop in the bucket. $82,000 on a $315,000 house is 35%. That's massive. So then they've got a confidence score right off the bat. I know that confidence score tells me that these are not accurate comps, because the higher that confidence score is, the worse they are, less accurate they are. So I'm going to look at this, and then I created a scoring system for all this stuff. Okay. And here's my scoring system. So, and I just gave it 1 to 6 points. And if it's a negative sign, then it means it's not accurate at all. And so this one, it only had 3 equity comps. That's horrible. So it got a -6 on that one, or wherever that went. -6 on that one, because that tells me that the accuracy of their equity comps is really, really horrible. Then we've got the analysis on the sales comps. I do the same kind of thing. I look at the number of comps they have, the confidence score that they have. Then I start taking their sales comps. I remove the high comp because maybe there's an outlier. Then I look at what was the margin between the high and the equity indicated value. Was it pulling the average up? The next thing I really want to do this year is look at what position was that high comp in. Was it in position 1 and given the most weight, or was it in position 6 and it's really inconsequential? Because sometimes the appraisal district will have a property in there that's really out of whack, but if it's in position 6, you take that property out, it might only affect the value by $500 because it's not given a lot of weight. The lower this number is, the more weight it's given. So I just analyze all that. Then I come up with my scoring system, and I look at what are the odds that I'm going to get a reduction based on the accuracy of TAD's comps. Okay, then I've got my number. But that doesn't tell me anything, because what if my comps are just as inaccurate? Well, then it does get to a point where I say, I'm sorry, appraisal district, you're not fulfilling your burden of proof. So I'm going to need you to come up with better comps. Oh, geez. Ann says, I literally just saw the appraised value of my house and almost had a heart attack. I'm so sorry, Ann. That sucks. You got it. Well, let me tell you what it's going to take to get that value down. Let's pour into the spreadsheet. All you got to do is start analyzing the numbers, write your computer program, hire a team of people, go on down to the appraisal district, start a protest, have 300 of your friends come out, and then we'll stand a chance. It's ridiculous. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm just telling the people that might want to make a business out of this, this is how you do it. This is the shortcut. This is the easy road. All right. All right. So I'm just explaining this stuff. I should probably just quit, because how many people are going to actually care? The only people who are going to care about this are my competitors, somebody who wants to try and find a problem with something I'm doing, or I'll be more than happy for a realtor to do this. Just nobody's going to put the time into doing this. It's ridiculous. It's not reasonable. And who else is going to want to try and protest for 30,000 people? Nobody's going to do this. So but anyway, so what I do is then I go through and I compare, I look at the ability for us to get a reduction. Once I look at that, I score it all. Then I'll look at, so I've got these hard stops in here. I'll look at, should I agree to their value? Should I not agree to it? What should I do? Then I'll also, another thing that I do is I look to see if you've uploaded evidence in my system. I'm looking at the evidence. So I might have, sometimes this is horrible. Sometimes people will send me great evidence, amazing evidence, but their property is already undervalued. The appraisal district has comps up here. They're already valued down here. So then what I actually have to do behind the scenes is get the appraisal district to come down below their number. And if the evidence you send me only gets you here and the comps get you here, then guess what? You're not getting a reduction, even if you got a total remodel on your hands. All right, y'all. If you're somebody that wants to copy, then here you go. You're not going to know the stuff. There's all sorts of formulas behind the scenes that's going. This whole process right here is a manual process for me. This year, I'm hoping to write computer program that can make some of that a little bit easier and do some of that analysis for me, because the only way to do that, you can see how that's a process that it's really good for only one person to do that. Because if I got multiple people working on that spreadsheet, all they got to do is sort something the wrong way and do one calculation wrong, and it just screws everything up. And so it's like, let me just sit behind here. I'll do I've got a checklist that I go through. So it's a very consistent, organized process. And then I knock it out, and I start one day and I keep going. And this is where you're really going to think it's crazy, but you're going to have, sometimes that takes me 2 or 3 days to do. And I will just sit in my seat and do it. Because I don't want to lose train of thought. If I lose train of thought, I got to start all over again, or I'll have to, back up and relearn. But anyway, all right, guys. Secrets revealed. There's the secret. How does Chandler do it? Chandler's nuts. Here's the thing I want you to take away. This is property tax stuff. But guess what? This isn't even my career. This isn't even my job. This isn't the thing that I have worked. I've been in real estate since 2002. Since I got in real estate, I've done a ridiculous analysis like this on all sorts of things. And on the real estate side, if you want to sell your house for top dollar, I know how to do it. And I've got a team of people. We're trained up, ready to rock. And so the same level of obsession I take to real estate. Let's see, Trek 1 to 4. If you Google Trek 1 to 4, here's what you're going to find. You're going to find this right here. Okay. This is a 1 to 4 family residential resale contract training video. This is our actual in-house training video, and I decided to release it publicly. It is 3 hours long. Okay. And it's dense. It is full of stuff. And by the way, this one only has 8,400 views. I've remade this thing like 5 times. It'll get a ton of views on it, because it is the best contract training out there. I am ridiculously, here's what it is. I'm actually not crazy detail oriented by nature. What it is I really care about doing a great job. And I put myself in somebody else's shoes and I say, what would I want somebody to do? What would I hope to see behind the scenes? If I could be one of my clients getting to see inside my company about what goes on, how the sausage is made, what would I hope to see? I would hope to see somebody that takes the home selling process really serious and stops at absolutely nothing to make sure that we're getting the best deals for our client. That's it. And so the same kind of ridiculous analysis I do on everything, or I don't do it. One of the two. Or I'm honest and I say, hey, I don't know. I don't have this figured out yet. But if I'm going to say I have something figured out, then I go all the way with it. And we just kick butt, take names, and that's it. So I've been in real estate since 2002. This tax protest thing just started in 2017. And so it just adds to the total volume of stuff. Let me think for a second. Is there anything I'm leaving out that I just think is a big piece of the puzzle? I just realized, like, when I'm eyeball deep into this stuff, I'm not gonna, y'all don't need to know all the math behind it. You just need to, you just get a hint. And I've given you way more than a hint. This was for the haters out there that wonder, how is it possible? Well, then what I do is all you have to do is care enough to, when there's a problem, you don't accept the output. If there's a problem, you say, okay, oops, I got that wrong. Or, you know what? I realized I could have got a better reduction there. How could I do this? How can I logically write down my analysis that I did? How can I make the recipe that went into that analysis? And if you can figure out the recipe and figure out what end result you're looking for, then guess what? Somebody can write a computer program on it. That's it. So, all right, y'all. What other questions y'all have before I log off? Anybody who's watched an hour and 35 minutes of this thing without falling asleep, man, God bless you. Anybody have any questions before I log off? I think I'm going to go drink some tea, and I've got a lot of stuff I actually got to do. So I'm going to log off. No questions. I've got 19 people that started watching and walked away from their computer and forgot that it was running. Maybe. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for your support. Secrets revealed. Over now.